Hello and welcome to my video on the first-person template that I built for Godot 4.6. So what this is a just simple starting point for anyone who's trying to get into making a first-person game. But really I made this specifically to kind of work for game jams. Um, the idea being that like if you join a game jam, you can just start with this guy, immediately basically kind of jump into making levels, configure your player character very easily, and just get started on making the game. Um, it's got some plugins that it's got in it. I don't really want to go too deep into like everything right now because we're just going to kind of go through the workflow. But it contains a plugin for dialogue, a plugin for the map reading, and a plugin for the gold source character controller by Ratmarrow. Really good stuff. I've slightly modified this to do some extra things that I think are just kind of useful and are generally useful for the kind of games that people make in first person. It contains a bunch of material assets I made, which are basically just shaders and color stuff that you can use in the level editor. And it's got some auto loads already set up for creating what are basically known as like helpers, which are just like simple functions you can use, threading, and also a material database. But we won't get too much into that. But basically, just some helper stuff for making first-person games. We got basic entities that are in TrenchBroom, which is going to be the level editor that's going to be used. And so these are like, simple stuff like providing like, a collider and a mesh, or just providing a mesh or a collision object. And we'll get into how all of that works later when we go over the TrenchBroom level editing and tying it all together with Godot. It's got basic nodes for working with TrenchBroom and really doing other first-person stuff. So we've got level loading. So we've got something called areas, which allows you to compartmentalize your different like levels essentially, and like kind of section them off and contain them, and then only load them in when they're needed. We'll get into a little bit about how this works, but basically the idea is that levels, which are the kind of like the top level of the map, or the top level of the like whole like level of the game, holds a list of leaf levels that it loads, and when it gets loaded, it loads those leaves, and then if a player, let's say, walks into one of those leaf levels, it will move the player to the next area. It'll basically like load that area and load its leaves. So that kind of creates like a situation where like you're never really loading more than you need, and it really only loads a maximum of a certain amount of level at a time. Level building. So this is important stuff that ties Godot and TrenchBroom together by allowing you to target things that are like stuff that you want like to build functionality in with Godot, but kind of built into or built outside the map object. We'll kind of get into a little bit about that, but it's a little bit to understand if you're just kind of explaining it. We've got triggers. One of these teleports the player. One of these just triggers when the player touches it, and it can determine XYZ axis which one was crossed. So that those are just two items that we can use to do triggering for the player. We've got aligner, which aligns nodes with a target named node, usually used to align a Godot object scene with a reference brush. So, spelled brush wrong. Oh well. Oops. Basically, it's going to align the node with a target node. I'm going to show a demo on how that works as well. The missing stuff we won't go into. That's a whole nother thing. But instead, we've got basic additions to the FPS controller. So I added teleportation, an interaction collider ray, so you can like look at stuff and interact with it by clicking or right-clicking. Sitting and standing, and disabling and enabling input control. We'll get to how all of that works. Just as well too, we got this basic input map set up. So that's how that goes. All right, let's get into the scripts. So there's 5 scripts you need to understand that are in the root of this directory for the template. There is setup dev. So this guy is going to be the one you're going to run first when you first download the project, and it's going to set up your whole dev environment. Okay, it's going to give you Trench Broom, it's going to give you Mess, which is a map compiler, and it's going to give you Godot, and it's going to put it all in your the center of your directory. It's going to put it, or not really put it in the center, but it's going to put it in the various places it needs to go to work, right? Then you've got compile map, which is going to compile the map located at map's main map. And then it's going to split up the map into layers based on the dictionary at the map table. We'll kind of get into how to set that up today. Run editor will run Godot's editor. Copy FGD is going to copy the entity definitions from Godot exported from the file exported out of Godot into the Trench Broom editor. And we've also got clean examples, which what that's going to do is if you run that, it's going to delete all of the example stuff that's in here and clean it out and give you a bare project to work with, just completely bare bones and clean. So yeah, we're gonna get into all of that, and so yeah, let's kind of hop into it. So first of all, when you download the thing, hold on, let's see, here we go. So when you download it, you're going to get the project downloaded. You're going to run where is it? Setup dev.ps1. You're going to open up a terminal. You'll say, I usually just do right-click run with PowerShell, and that will run the different scripts, right? So you'll right-click run with PowerShell, and what it's going to do is it's going to download the level editor, it's going to download Mess, and it's going to download Godot. So in the bin here, we've got the bin directory, we've got Mess and Trench Broom already pre-downloaded, but if you if you do need to set up the dev environment, just right-click run with PowerShell, and it'll set that up real quick. Okay, once that's set up, let's actually talk about and probably even while that sets up, because that's going to take a second for you, let's actually talk about the directory structure that I have. So I have a very particular directory structure that I use for my projects, and it's like, kind of a workflow thing. So the first one up here is this _dev folder. So what that does is that is where I put dev files that I do not want in the end compiled version of the game. So, for example, let's say I make like a sandbox testing scene. I'll put it in this _dev, and then it won't end up in the ending or the resulting game output, just because I exclude it in the project. So, like, for example, if you have like a sprite sheet, for example, that you like break up into smaller pieces using like a script or something, I would put that sprite sheet into _dev, put a script file, or like not a script file, or a some sort of like PowerShell script or some sort of script that does the ripping apart the sprite sheet and turning it into its own individual assets, and then copying all that stuff to where it needs to go. And I'll just keep that in _dev. So that way, it's never in the project. It's just in its own little folder doing its own thing. Add-ons, this is just where you put your add-ons in Godot. We're not going to really go over that too much, but there is one very important thing we do need to understand. If you go into Gold Source Character Controller and you go into Scenes, player.tscn is your player scene. I didn't want to move it or anything, but it's just right there in the add-ons. It's slightly modified, as I stated earlier, so. But that's really the only thing you need to know about add-ons, is that's where the player controller is kept. Bin is where the output happens for Godot, so when you export, but also stores mess and trench broom, our map compiler, and level editor. Okay, we'll get into those in a little bit. Colors stores a color palette and a color like a special resource, like a packed color array kind of thing that just contains all the colors in the palette. So that's just a simple thing. Okay, dialogue. Dialogue is where we store all the dialogic dialogue. So like, you know, this has stuff in it, but normally this would be empty. When you clean examples, this will empty out. Editor is where we store what's called the editor FGD file. Godot outputs an FGD file that needs to go into Trench Broom, so that way we can use the entities and like sync the entities between Trench Broom and Godot. We've got FGD. That's going to be where we actually keep our FGD definitions for Godot. Again, these will turn into that FGD file that's going to go here in the editor. And then this is going to get copied when you run copy FGD here. This is going to get copied into the bin Trench Broom games file, right? And then it's going to become the new FGD file. So I'll talk about the workflow on that and how you get all that set up. We've got maps. So this is going to be a directory where we store maps. So there's one map that's very important, main.map. This is going to contain your main map that's all connected together, essentially, and then layered out. So there'll be separate layers for each part of the map, and we just build based on that. And that's going to be what's built when we're using compile map. Music's where music's stored, but this is going to be empty, but I just like to keep the directory there because you are going to use music and sounds and stuff like that. Scripts. So this is where we store a majority of the scripts. We're not going to go over these right now, but that's just where those are stored. Shaders are where shaders are stored. Duh. We have an outline and a vertex and a grass shader just to get started. Those are very like simple just setups that, you know, for the games that I kind of like to make personally, that they're just like, you know, create like outline textures. But textures is also just a bunch of colors that we can use. However, there are some special textures. So let's go run in and talk about those real quick just before we go into Trench Broom in a second here. There's frame marking blue, green, magenta, orange, blue, red, yellow. Yeah, right? Okay, cool. So there's these guys, okay? These are all special, what I call marking textures. So what these guys do, okay, is they don't alter the mesh at all when they come in, and they're used for determining special things about a mesh. So I'll get into the philosophy behind that and how you do that. But for right now, these are just special textures that you generally don't want to use. All right, cool. So I think we've about covered everything. Let's jump into stuff. So first of all, we're going to want to run the editor. So let's right-click Run with PowerShell. And boom, this guy will come in. Cool. All right. Okay, cool. So when you load in, we're going to have a main scene that's already created and loads an area called start. So if you want to clean out the examples later, which you can use the /clean examples function here, that'll clean it out. You just delete this part, and this gets rid of the load to the load start area. So let's actually open up start, and we'll kind of start going through the whole thing and start talking about how all this comes together. So this start map is a test map that I made that includes some stairs in various configurations, ramps in various configurations, and then shows off the teleport system in kind of a more obvious way, the teleport system in a less obvious way in this hallway. The difference between the different entities, the difference between how aligners work, how the different things you can do with aligners, and how chairs work. Okay, so let's actually just hop in this really quick just so you see what you're getting. Okay. Here, let me do this really quick. Oops. There we go. Okay, cool. So, we'll kind of like walk around and take a look, but basically, I've got some different ways for you to like test stuff for your character. I'm not going to try to walk too far deep because I'm pretty slow. I could probably speed up the character a little bit, but these are usually the kind of pace I like to go in the games. But it lets you, you know, walk around, test the ramps, and feel what's good, and yada yada. Okay. Let's actually go walk over and use the dialogue system real quick. So when you spawn, you'll see this green button. This tells you that it's a first-person template by me, and that you can close the dialogue by pressing space. But you can also just click. Same thing with this guy. If we click this guy, it's going to tell us it's how to use the teleport trigger. So the teleport trigger lets us teleport, you know, obviously. So an example of this is if we go walk over to this yellow guy and we walk through, it teleports us to the red. The red doesn't teleport us back, though, right? It just teleports us one way. The green teleports us but rotates us. So if I walk the other way, it'll come out this way. So, you know, it kind of has just a little, like, that one's kind of not as obvious, right? So let's go take a look at this guy. This is the flip tunnel. Okay, it's going to show you how to silently teleport a player. And we will dissect all of this stuff here really quick. But when we walk through, it spits us out right where we came back. Even though we just walked through there. So if we keep walking through, you know, it keeps teleporting us back. And that's just an illusion of, you know, because your camera can't tell when you flip. All right, anyways, here's the entities. So there's 3 different entities. There's World Spawn, Illusion, and Geo. So World Spawn has a collider and a mesh. Illusion has no collider but a mesh. Geo, no collider. Or, I'm sorry, collider but no mesh. So that's just a simple little setup there. I'll go over how to do all that. We're going to dissect this map, and we're going to make one of our own as kind of a workflow example of how to get things done. These are aligners. So when we click this, it says it's how to use an aligner with a facing material to orient an aligner. To see how this works, we got to open up the editor. So I'll show off this, but you can see that they're aligned and pointing at different, you know, different ways. I'll show how that works in the editor. And then we've got chairs. So chairs, you can click them, and they need a special facing material to show where to put the camera. So we put this guy down, and boom, we're there. Boom, and we're looking upwards. Too. We're like laying in the bed. You know what I mean? So that's a cool little thing there. All right. So that's basically the demo for it, right? Let's stop this and let's head on over and let's see how the whole thing actually operates here. So first of all, let's hop over and open up Trench Broom and set that up. So once you've done your dev, setup dev, it should be all done. We can double-click Trench Broom, right? You're going to go and you're going to say Open Map from First-Person Template Maps, and we're going to go to main.map. Okay, and we're going to click Open. Okay, so we're going to start here real quick. Okay, so we're not going to rebuild this map right now because we're going to make our own custom map to rebuild because this map unfortunately takes about 2 minutes and I don't want to have to edit and cut down the footage. But this is what it looks like in the map editor. So a little bit different. Okay, so we can see there's the ramps and the stairs. Those all look about the same. But the triggers here are active, or not active, but visible, right? the button doesn't look anything like it looked before. And where the text was over here, you know, because we got this world spawn illusion text, we've got these brushes, these squares, cubes or whatever, cuboids. So what's going on? Let's dissect all the bits here. So what each of these colored cuboids are is their reference brushes. So reference brushes are used to position other elements or get information about the map. So in this example, right, I've got these 3 triggers here. When you walk through them, right, that's when it teleports you. Okay, so each of these have names. So like teleportation destination, teleportation source 90, because this one rotates you 90 degrees, teleport source, right? So that is kind of how you like mark out where things are going to go. So you can like block out your map very quickly by using these reference brushes and, you know, aligning stuff to it. So I don't want to get too much into how to operate Trench Broom in a very simple manner, but to show you how easy it is for me to create a new reference brush, if I go in, let me just make sure this is all locked. Okay, cool. So if I go in and I create this and I go walk over and pick any color and right click and go create reference brush and then plug in any name, you know, whatever name I want. This is now a reference brush that I can go reference in Godot and position elements towards. So you can very quickly block out maps, right? Using this reference brush technique, where anytime you have something you're going to need in the future, throw a reference brush there. In Godot, it won't show up at all, but when it's time to get things done, you use the reference brush to align things. So let's talk about the other 3 entities. So reference brush doesn't show up at all for the camera, but it's there, you know, hiding in the background, able to be used for positioning and sizing. Here we've got more reference brushes right above our cubes. These represent text, right? They show where the text is. And I'm going to show you how to get all of that working, but first let's talk about our 3 object types. So we've got world spawn, which has a collider and no mesh, or I'm sorry, a collider and a mesh. Illusion, which gives you a mesh but no collider, and then Geo, which gives you a collider, no mesh. Okay, so using these 3 things, you can build any level you could possibly want, and also reference brush, of course. Can't forget reference brush. But all we need to do, right, to make any of these objects is draw out what we want, select as many of the of the stuff as we want, you know, as many of the you know, cuboids, brushes, you know, meshes, you know, and we right click and we say create brush entity and we choose Geo, Illusionary, or World Spawn. One of the 2, right? Or one of the 3. And that creates an object, essentially, that is going to show up as its own object in Godot, right? So if we go back to our map here, and I'm in Godot, and I open up the map file for this, we can go take a look, and we can see illusion text, world spawn text, geo text, right? These are where all these brushes are in here, right, in Godot. Okay, let's talk about aligners, because aligners are big and they're very useful. So how they work, okay, is if we go into Godot, all right, we take a look, we can see that the reference brush has 2 textures on it. It's got this orange texture, which we'll call the base texture, and this F texture, which we're going to call the facing texture. What this guy does, okay, is it tells the game, when the importer for the map, hey, there's something special here, do something, right? It tells it, hey, this is like, you know, this gives extra information. So for aligner, what it does is it lets you orient an object based on the normal of the surface, right? So if we go and we take a look, check that out. Aligner is facing forward. Aligner's facing off and to the right here. And aligner's facing upwards here, right? So that will let you get extra information on, like, essentially what's going on in the object. So yeah, if you ever need to like face an object some way, you can use a reference brush with a facing texture, and it'll face it and orient it towards that way. Next, we've got chair. So chair is a whole object, right? And as you can see, it's got this brown part, which is the model, and then it's got this guy, which it's hard to see, but this is a facing texture, right? Here's a better looking one where you can see the F, but it's a facing texture, right? When you right-click the chair, you know, it sees it's a chair object. When you right-click it, it puts the camera there, right? So we can use facing to get various pieces of information. It's very useful for that. Okay, so let's kind of go into our own map file and make a map real quick from the ground up here. So let me just save everything real quick. We're gonna close this out. Let me just run over to GitHub and make sure anything changed. Yeah, it's changed. We can discard. Boom. There was one tiny little change. Okay, cool. So let's close this guy out and clean out the examples really quick here. So we'll go run over here. We'll say clean examples, run in PowerShell. Okay. I forgot to write the thing that deletes the dialog, but it will delete the dialog by the time this video is back up. I promise you that. And cool. So we're all set. It's got everything all cleaned up. Let's delete the Godot folder, just because if you don't know, that cleans the cache out for Godot. And we'll right-click Run Editor. Make a little prayer that it works. I tested this pretty good, so it better work, is all I gotta say. Okay, no errors, please. No errors, please. Oh, there was an error. There was an error. That's not good. It could be any kind of error. Could be a big error. Could be a small error. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's just Dialogic crying about there being no timelines. It's fine. We're good. Everything's cool. Okay, so let's jump into making a map super quick. Okay, so we don't really have anything here. Let's start from scratch. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a map, a new map file real quick. So let's run over to Trench Broom. Open this sucker. New map. And we'll click that basic game type, and we're all set. Okay, so the player spawns in this game template at 0, 0. So we're just gonna take it. That's gonna be where the player is gonna be. So let's start making this map. Okay, so it gives us a default cube. Let's just change that cube's face to white, and we're gonna save it, and we're gonna call it main.map. We're gonna go up, and we're gonna put it in maps. Save. Cool. Okay, awesome. So we're cooking. All right. Let's go import this and get this all set up, and I'll show you how we do the map thing. So we're going to create a layer. We're going to call it what's it called? We're going to call it sandbox. We'll call it for right now. Okay. And I'm going to go in. We're going to make sure our objects are on that sandbox layer. So when we lock it, all the stuff should turn off. Pro tip, that's how I always check, but I'm sure maybe there's a cooler way to check, but whatever. So let's save it, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to open up a terminal, okay? And in fact, you don't even really need to open up a terminal for this, but I just usually keep it in a terminal just because it's easier to see. But we'll just do it this way really quick. We'll go in here, we'll right-click Compile Map, and we'll say Run with PowerShell. But we need to edit it first. So let's go do that real quick. Let me jump into here. We're going to close everything. Close all. No, close all. There we go. Compile map. Okay, cool. So the top variable map file is the map file we want to target. The map table, this guy right here, this is going to be a dictionary, a PowerShell dictionary that contains the layer name to the map name you want to export it as, okay? So you can do some cool stuff with this. So for example, if I had 2 layers, okay, I've got sandbox right now, and we're going to put this out to sandbox.map. But let's say I had sandbox to electric boogaloo, okay? I could put a comma here and do sandbox to electric boogaloo. I don't know how to spell boogaloo. Whatever. You know, sandbox 2, you know, electric, we'll just call it. It will combine both of these layers into a single map file. So you can do very complicated layering and like put it all together and sandwich it into individual maps as you want. So we're just going to do sandbox to sandbox map first. Okay, so let's come in here. We're going to type /compile map like that and press enter. And it's going to go, oops, hold on, my bad. There we go. It's going to go and it output some stuff. We're going to delete that. That's wrong. And it output our sandbox.map. Okay. So let's go run into Godot and put that guy into our game here. Okay. So to do that, we need to create a new scene. So we're going to go into maps. This is usually just where I put it. I'm going to create a new scene, make it a 3D scene, and we're going to call it, actually, we're going to make it of level. Oops. Level, boom. And we're going to call it sandbox dot, yeah, whatever, TC. Okay, yeah, that does exactly what we want. Okay, cool. And the root name is going to be sandbox. Okay, and we're going to click OK. All right, so it made this sandbox level now. Okay, so we're gonna right click it. We're gonna add child node, and we're gonna add a map underneath it. Okay, we're gonna go to local map file. We're gonna go choose our sandbox.map, and then now we're ready to build our map. Okay, so to do that, let's just turn off all of this stuff. So to do that, we're gonna click sandbox. We're gonna click rebuild, and boom. It should pop right in, okay? Now, generally, if you build your levels right, you should only have to hit this rebuild button right here, and it'll rebuild your whole map, okay? That's the idea of the workflow, okay? So we're going to add stuff to this and kind of show how everything is going to kind of come through and work, okay? So generally, when you spawn stuff in TrenchBroom, it creates a default entity called world spawn. That contains all the stuff in the world. Okay, so this world spawn, this basic world spawn, is what happens when you are in TrenchBroom. If you have any, let's say we made this an entity like Funk World Spawn, right? And it's its own specific entity, and we right-click it and we say make structural. That's what it's doing. It's sending it back into this top entity 0 world spawn. Okay, so if we know this, right, we can put all of our level geometry that we kind of don't really care about, doesn't need to be named, etc., into here, and then create smaller objects in the world that we can use and interact with. Okay, so let's actually make one of those objects real quick. So I'm gonna make a little man here. Okay, ooh, we're going to make this just a little bigger here because it is pretty small. I'm going to make this man, and we're going to select it, and we're going to go Funk World Spawn. Okay, cool. All right. So this guy, okay, now has a, it's going to basically be its own object. So let's go and give it a name real quick and call it man. Okay, we'll save. We'll go run over and compile our map. We'll go back over to Godot, and we'll click our top level and hit rebuild. Boom. And it's just in. Okay, so let's click play here really quick. And nothing happens, right? Why did nothing happen? Well, because in main, we had yet to set up our area loading thing. So nothing is loaded by default. No areas are loaded. So let's load an area really quick. So we're going to say areas.force load. We're going to call it sandbox. Okay. And we're going to give a string that lists where this is. So we're going to say maps slash sandbox.tscn. Okay. So what this is going to do is it's going to force load the sandbox. So let's give that a try real quick now. And boom, we're in the world. Okay, we've got our man sitting right there, you know, being all cute. He's just sitting there. So let's jump in here and start sprucing this up and making this work right. So we want to now add functionality to our man. Okay, so let me just do this real quick. Okay, so in our map for sandbox, we see that there's our world, right? And then man, okay? That is its own object with its own origin at the center. Okay, so this is already, you know, super useful. You can just part out all the objects and then you can make them their own object, right? But let's say we wanted to add some functionality to this. You're like, okay, well, this is cool, but I want to add, let's say you could like click on the guy, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a rebuild handler. Okay, so we're going to go into here. We'll say rebuild handler. Okay, and we'll call it add man functionality. Okay, so what this guy's going to do, all right, let's go extend script, and we're going to, I usually like making built-in scripts for this kind of stuff. You don't have to, though. You can create a script with a location that's saved, but it does make it easier when you're doing per map functionality to use built-in scripts, just because it's easier. Per level, I guess, functionality would be the better description. Okay, so let's just click create. And first of all, we got to make it an add tool script. I don't know why it doesn't do that automatically for you. Like, it should know that rebuild handler is a tool script and not to be screwing around with it. But whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to make an export var, and we're going to call it man name. Actually, let's just call it name string man, and then at export var map. Okay. Oh, right. Man name. I was like wondering why I was freaking out about that. Okay. So then what we're going to do is we're going to say func rebuild. Okay, we're going to call super on it, which is going to call the rebuild handler's actual stuff. Okay, but we want to do that at the end. So this is kind of important for rebuild. In rebuild handlers, super should always be called at the end of setup, so that way it doesn't pass it off, if that kind of makes sense. It'll pass it off to the next object. So you always want to make sure super is the last thing you do if you are doing this sort of thing. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to add some functionality to man. So we actually want to add what's called a click action to man, and that'll make it clickable by the player. And we're going to set all that up. So let's actually just set everything up with that. So we're going to go var click action equals click action.new. Okay, and then we're going to say click action. Oh, here, actually, let's do this too first. We're going to say var man equals map.get node man name. Okay, so we're going to get the actual man object, and we're going to say man.addChild. And we're going to say click action. We're going to say click action.owner equals self.owner. So that way it owns it. And then I'm going to say click action.name equals click action. Okay, then the very end we're going to say click action dot on left click press dot connect, and we'll just make a quick anonymous function here real quick that will print hello. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Let's hope this works. Oh, right. You got to make sure you reload the project or reload the save scene when you add tool scripts. I forgot about that, or else they won't be running. All right, cool. I think we're all set. All right, let's give this a quick run. So the idea is that when we click rebuild, oh, hold on, I cried on something. Oh, right. I messed up. I made a huge mistake. There we go. There we go. Okay. Let's see if it's in here. Click action. Okay, cool. It didn't add a signal, though, which kind of bothers me. I don't know if this is going to work right. I might need to choose a different... Yeah, this didn't work right at all. Hold on here. Okay. There's another way to do this. Instead of adding a click action, because it's a whole nother more complicated deal, instead, let's just get the man, get his get the mesh that's under him. So each man, obviously it's a world spawn, has a polygon mesh that's underneath it. So we're going to get the node for that. And we're going to say get node dot set material. Set material override. And we're going to say materials dot blue. It should be 0. Hold on. Let me actually do this really quick. Polygon Mesh 2 is a special class of Mesh Instance 3D that I made that does a small amount of special stuff. Set material, surface override material. There we go. That's what it is. Okay, cool. So we're just going to do this, and it hopefully will change the character from white to blue. There we go. Cool. Easy peasy, right? So it's like if you need to add certain kinds of functionality and stuff to objects, there's different ways. I just didn't want to go through, there's a way to do it. I just need to write a more complicated thing to do this, and this is just easier. So whenever you have these maps, okay, you can add these objects in that we then use these rebuild handlers to go in and do something with, okay? And when the rebuild button is pressed here, it rebuilds the map files and then rebuilds these rebuild handlers. So, you basically, you like kind of cascade in how you want functionality done. So let's actually use an aligner and a couple other things, and let's just kind of so you get like an idea of how you're supposed to do things. So let's go add a node, and we're gonna choose a liner. Okay, and we're gonna create something underneath a liner, like a label 3D. Okay. And we'll put hello world. And we'll make it pink. And we'll make the text super big. Huh. That's weird. That's a new one. I think it's just it doesn't like the... I'll have to try that when we get into game. I wonder if that actually does that in game. I'm pretty sure it won't. I think it's just the grid is screwed up. But whatever. We've got this text, right? It's on an aligner. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to choose our map file. We're going to choose a facing material, which that's going to be frame.tres in special, because that's actually what I kind of use as like a default marking material. And we'll call it align me. Okay. All right. Let's go into here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a square. We're going to right-click Brush Entity Reference Brush. Set one of these as a frame. Okay. And change the name to Align Me. Okay, and then we're going to go do the workflow again. So we go and run compile map. It compiles the map. We come over here. We click rebuild. And boom, it has aligned itself. Okay. Now you'll notice the text looks like it's backwards, but in reality, it naturally faces the opposite way in Godot. So we just turn it by 180 degrees and it'll turn back around. So let's kind of talk about how we can how we speed up certain kind of workflow things. So we're looking in here, right? We've got our reference brush. Okay. We move our reference brush somewhere, right? We rotate it to the direction we want. We come over to our map compiler. We compile the map real quick. We come over here and we click rebuild, and boom, it instantly moves. So now we can use a liner for like rapid prototype positioning to get things in the level like super quick. And again, all of this is part of that rebuild functionality. So you change the map, you add the stuff in Godot, it goes in and it, aligns itself. Okay. Let's talk about another one, trigger. Okay, so we got trigger. Okay. That one is going to take a map and a target. Okay, so let's call the thing trigger me. Okay. All right, and then we'll click. We can't click rebuild yet, right? Because it's not in there. So let's go run over. We'll make a copy of this. We'll say trigger me. Okay, we'll just make it axis aligned. Change the thing, because that way it's all one color. Okay. And so one thing I like to do, I'll sometimes like to either use, I'll either use frame as a texture, or I'll use these marking textures. So all of these are similar to frame in that they're not really used. The user's never going to see these, or should never see these. These are only used for you making things easier on yourself, when you're like programming or like making models or whatever. So I'm just going to make it marking blue. Okay, we're going to call it trigger me, and we're going to save. We're going to do the workflow again, right? We go over, compile map, come over here, rebuild, boom. Trigger now has a shape. Okay, and if we go and we add a built-in script to this guy, it's going to be an at tool again, because it's just what it is. We're going to say func trigger. say super. And we're going to say print, I was triggered. Okay. There's also, too, on trigger, we have various signals that we can use to determine which side of the trigger we're on. So let's do the click play button thing and go find where to put the trigger. So walk around a little bit here. It's somewhere around here. There we go. I was triggered. So I've hit the box somewhere. I don't know where it was. I guess it was kind of small. I guess it was in this little corner over here. But there is a shape, right? There is a little collider here. And when you touch it, you know, or when you leave the trigger, it triggers. So that's just another tool you can use to get things done super quick. And it just, you know, it makes it work, right? Okay, so let's see what else we got here. If there's anything else that really needs to get covered. Oh yeah, there's chairs. So chairs are an example of how you use the facing materials in like a model. So let's go run over to here, and let's change our Funk World Spawn here. We're gonna right click it, and we're gonna call it a chair. Okay. What we're gonna do for this chair, oops, is we're gonna put this in here in his chest here. We're gonna make it transparent, and we're gonna put a frame. So transparent in my in this kind of like situation, or like with the meshes or whatever, it deletes the faces that are transparent, like from the mesh when it imports. So now we can sit in the lap of our guy. We just needed that facing mesh to be on the front to show where the camera should be. So let's jump in on that and give that a try here. So we go, and what do? Compile map, and come over here, and we click this button, and we click, where is it? We click rebuild. There we go. Boom. Uh-oh. Once again, I added a thing, didn't click reload. My bad. Yeah. If you get errors about not being in tool mode, you gotta restart the editor real quick. Oh, hold on. There we go. That was my bad. I made a slight mistake. I added this guy, and I forgot to make it part of the entity. That was my bad. So if you get an error about incoming frame from Trench Broom did not have a facing material, that's letting you know it couldn't find the thing. It probably wasn't in the model. All right, so let's click rebuild. And oh, right. Made another slight error here. We forgot to name it, so this is another thing, right? If you change the entity type, it might lose the name, or you make a new entity off of it. So we just come in here, compile map, come back, click rebuild, and now he's blue. Awesome, no errors that time. And now you've got this little marker 3D that shows where the camera is going to be. So if we come in here and we walk up to him, uh-oh, no way. Well, let's find out what happened, because that should have worked here. Chair, click action, Hold on, I think it was just an issue with that. That should have totally worked. There we go. Cool. And now we're sitting in our dude's lap. There we go. I guess it just was a rebuild issue. I guess I just didn't rebuild it right or something. But there you go. So now you can like walk up and sit in its lap. So generally, prototyping should be that easy. It should very quickly take you from like, you know, not making the level to making the level, right? And now it's like I can like copy this chair guy or whatever and make as many as I want in my level, and it's just super fast. So yeah, that about sums that kind of like basic world building kind of stuff up, where it's like, you know, you have your map file, it compiles, and then you've got these little rebuilders that compile under it that align everything and do all the stuff and add functionality and, you know, maybe randomize things. And yeah, and you just get this cascading rebuild kind of script. So yeah, I think that really is about it. I don't think there's anything more that needs to be said about this video. But if you do have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. And yeah, look forward to my game made in this kind of outline art style called Liminalita. It is on itch.io on my profile. Yeah, go please take a look. Tell me what you think, and tell me if you're excited about Liminality coming out.